Well, hello, everyone. My name is Kirby Hassman. I am with Hassman Marketing, but today I am doing a promo corner, promo show, special edition of the Delivering Marketing Joy show, but it's an Ask Kirby edition. So I'm going to be fielding questions from the industry, from people from around the Facebook world, I guess. And so I'm really excited about this opportunity. I want to thank Promo Corner for hosting this. For those who don't know that much about me, we've been doing Delivering Marketing Joy for, 300 and some episodes, which is really cool. It's a weekly show where I get the opportunity to interview authors and marketers and entrepreneurs from all over. And it's really cool. But every once in a while, I take the opportunity to field questions from the audience. And so the gang at Promo Corner, Brandon and Lori and Joel and that whole gang thought it would be cool to do one live. So I, in the interest of transparency, reached out to some people, came up with some questions. So I have a few queued up. But what I want from you is as you listen, feel free to message questions in the comments. Brandon's going to be looking for them. I think Lori's going to be looking for them, and they're going to get them to me, and I will do my best to answer any question you have. You can ask me anything. We can talk content. We can talk business. Or just life in general. So feel free to get ready to ask me some questions. But I want to go to some that I already had queued up. And so I reached out to a few people who were kind enough to send some to me, and I'll start there to get us going. So again, as you have questions, fire them at me. I'm going to start with one from Josh Robbins at Vault Promotions. Josh is my buddy, and I want to show you. So I typed these up. This was my question from Josh. So it's a pretty extensive question. So I'm going to kind of try and boil it down. Essentially, he asked, how do I manage to stay connected through social media, which so many of us need to do, right? We know from a business perspective, we need to be connected in social media. But right now it's tough. Anxiety levels are up, and with the division that has come from this election cycle and the pandemic and the murder hornets and racial tensions, while you want to stay connected, it's really easy to get taken off your game. And so he kind of asks, what practices or advice do you have to navigate the social seas? Do I limit my screen time? And then yet also be involved in a meaningful way during these times? So I think this is a great question. It's a great place to start. And I just want to start by saying I totally struggle with this too. I do need to be on social media for business, and not only for business, but I think because my company is much more of a marketing firm, we actually manage social media for other clients and things like that. So it's almost even more imperative. And it also blows up my notifications even more, right? I've got from all my clients who get them, I get notifications from their stuff. So it is something that I struggle with. So I've done a few things, especially in the last probably 30 to 60 days. Number one, I think we need to give ourselves some grace. I think Brandon and I were actually talking just before we started this. This is a real thing. And we need to give ourselves grace that sometimes we do get caught up and swept away, because I think some of the things that we have done historically to have a social life have gone away, or at least they've diminished a great deal. It's harder you can't go to a ball game or a concert or, have something that you would generally look forward to doing to get away from social media. Our entire social circle sometimes is built around Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook. And so I think that's one of the reasons that we're seeing so much anxiety around it. But a few things I've done. Number one, I have went through the process, especially when I feel myself getting really worked up. I go through the process of actually hiding posts or hiding people who are truly mean-spirited, false, negative. Like, if you disagree with me, that's fine. But if you say things that are clearly, offensive or mean, over the last 30 to 60 days, I've just gotten rid of people like that on both sides of the political spectrum and on both sides of most arguments. If you want to have a conversation, I'm usually interested in that. I'm not interested in you just saying mean things. And I've hidden posts that are the same way, that are just clearly false. And by the way, this is a side note, but I think that it would clean up Facebook a ton if we only posted things that were our own thoughts. If we actually were required to actually type up our own thoughts about things, I think that it would make Facebook a lot better, because we wouldn't be able to brainlessly share things that actually didn't encapsulate our views. If we want to post something, why don't you post something that's your own thoughts? like I said, I've snoozed people for 30 days. I do struggle with this because I want to be careful not to create an echo chamber, right? Like that only I hear from people who I agree with. So I've trying to walk that line. And then my final thought, and Josh is my buddy, and I think that he will appreciate this, but I think a really important rule is that you do not have to participate in every argument that you're invited to. One of my rules of life is rule number 2 is never argue with an idiot. They'll drag you down to their level and then beat you with experience. I think so many times we're trying to convince people who are not interested in being convinced, and it's frustrating to both of us. And so those are a few things that I do to, I guess, navigate the social seas, which is, I believe, what Josh said. So that's my first question that I've gotten from the audience. As I said, as you have questions, fire them at me. I'm going to try and take them live. I'm actually kind of intrigued by how this is going to go. So feel free to throw any questions at me. All right. My next question is from Mark Graham from commonsku. He said, Kirby, you recently hosted a virtual event for customers at Hossman Marketing. How was that experience? What goals did you have for the event, and did you accomplish them? I love this question. A, it's a great question, but B, I love that Mark Graham of all people asked me, because Mark Graham and the team at commonsku were sort of one of the reasons that inspired me to try to do the virtual event. I had attended a couple of virtual events through commonsku, and even on the platform that they used, Hopin, that's what we decided to use as well. And it was the first time that I realized a virtual event could be fun and engaging and quick and not boring and all those sort of things. And so thank you for sort of inspiring me, Mark, to do that. So how was the experience? So the experience overall was really good. I think in any event like this, whether it's physical or virtual, you almost always leave with something, oh man, I wish this would have happened or this would have happened. And that was true of this event as well. And I think that's human nature, right? The one negative out of the 100 positives, you focus on that. Did I accomplish the goal? So I would say my overall goal when I first started creating this event was to replace our end user show, our physical end user show. And so we had vendors, we had speakers, we had sessions, and then we had vendors, such an expo area. I would say if the goal was to replace the end user show, the answer is no. It really didn't. It was a little clunky in that particular regard. I think both customers and suppliers, some of them were more comfortable with the technology than others, but I would say that part, no, wasn't a raving success. On the other side, if the question is, do we want to provide value and interesting content for our clients? The answer would be absolutely slam dunk yes. And one of the things that we have said is we want to become the premier marketing and media company in Ohio. And I would say if the goal is to move ourselves closer to that, then absolutely, I think it was a success. We are looking at doing an additional event like this maybe in 2021, have already started sort of planning. It'll just look differently, okay? So that's a great question. Looks like I have my first question from the audience, so I'm reading this to you as I'm reading it, so bear with me. From Javier Melendez. Javier's a great guy. It says, Kirby's an OG, which I think just means old guy, when it comes to content and video. But today, what are the thoughts on using video in messaging, like in an email or DM to engage contacts? So I think this is a great question, Javier. And what's really funny is we actually had the opportunity to do this yesterday. We, through this process, you continue to go to market, you continue to kind of get out there. Well, we had one of those wonderful opportunities where someone who worked at one of the companies we used to work with has moved and they needed our services again. They placed a substantial order with us late last week. And so rather than just let that go, I recorded a special video that just thanking them personally by name, talking to them about the project. I made it very personal for their project. And I've done this a bunch of times, but I literally just did this like yesterday or the day before. Recorded it. When I hit record, I started talking. When I stopped, that was the end of the video. There was no editing. I uploaded the video. I actually recorded it right on this camera on the computer, uploaded it directly to YouTube, sent it to client as an unlisted link. Now, they ironically both of them sent me thank yous for my thank you note. So I think overall that was a huge success. So I think using video, especially because the technology exists that you can use it in a much more personal way, not just a blanket video. We do that too. But if you're going to send it via email or DM, why not do it in a way that it's actually for them? So I think that is one of the ways that you can utilize it. And as a matter of fact, I think Javier sent me a message this morning, actually, right, Javier? If so, thank you. Just telling me that I was going to do well and sending me a note of encouragement. And so it's funny, like I saw that on the treadmill today, and those sort of things just mean a lot. And I think, we don't do that enough. Don't get me wrong. It's important that we sell, and selling is how we keep the lights on. But it's funny how a simple thank you with no ask in return can really help to build the relationship that when you go to sell, you've got a better relationship to do it. So yeah, utilizing the tools that we have to do the old school things that we know to do can be really powerful. So great question, Javier. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. As you see these, please feel free to send me more questions as we go. All right. So next up, my next question comes from Jason Noakes from Promo Pulse. Thanks for sending this, Jason. Jason's question is, what are your favorite tricks to getting the most personal productivity out of each and every day? So this is a great question. And it's one that I get asked a lot. In the interest of transparency, I wrote a whole book about it. In the second half of the Give First Economy, I talked about, things to start doing and things to stop doing in order to be more productive and ultimately more happy. But I want to focus on really one today. In looking at Jason's question, the place where I feel like there's tactics you can do, and then there are things that are foundational that can really change your day and your week and your life. And to me, the morning routine is one of the most important things. I think most people hop out of bed, with just enough time to grab a cup of coffee, take a quick shower, and get to the office or wherever they need to go. And when you leave yourself just enough time, you generally don't have enough time, right? You don't have enough time to really get all of the things done that you want to do. And I think the most productive people, the most happy people have very intentional routines, very intentional mornings. And one of the things I'd say is you already have a routine. Most people have a routine. They just are not intentional about it. And so, for me, I'm very intentional about what I do in what order, because I have set goals, whether it be physical or mental, and my morning routines guide me toward those things, right? So whether it's what I read, what I drink, what I do, what I eat, like for example, I get my cup of coffee, then I read, then I exercise, because I found that that's a routine I will maintain. Well, I've talked a lot about this, but I was just reading a book, actually technically listening to a book by Jay Shetty called Think Like a Monk. And he did a really good job of explaining and talking about morning routines. And he talked about instituting time. Now, one of the things to have a morning routine, you actually do need more time. And people always push back against that, getting up 15, 30, 60 minutes earlier than you do now. But it's about physical time, but it's about the acronym time. And his time acronym is thankfulness, insight, meditation, and exercise. Each morning routine should include those things. So I've talked a little bit about my first 60 seconds of my day, trying to get control of it. That's my thankfulness time, right? Where I spend right away. I'm not worried about what happened yesterday. I'm not worried about what's going to happen. I spend a lot of time being thankful right away. Insight, to me, it's reading blogs like Seth Godin, watching videos. Even writing helps a little bit for me. That's a part of it. Meditation, that's one I struggle with, but I've found time and it really helps me. I actually do my meditation in the shower. It's a place where I've found space to do it. And then exercise. I'm on the treadmill every day. And I eat the same things every morning and all that sort of thing. And I think that sets me up for a productive and happy day. I've got a couple questions lining up, and I'm going to jump to those here in just a moment. But I do want to get to my next question here because it leads nicely. So I talked about morning routines being really important to me. My next question comes from Joel Moore, as he asks, people may or may not know that you have a morning routine that involves getting breakfast at our local hospital. Totally true. He said, I've been curious as to see how the pandemic and guessing that there have been hospital restrictions have affected your morning routine. I love this because Joel, I'm such a creature of habit. Everybody knows where they could find me at what point of the day, especially in the morning. And to answer your question, it was a struggle at first because when all of this shut down, obviously I wasn't going to the office anyway, so I didn't do that piece of my morning routine. But even when it started to open up a little bit, like I started coming to the office by myself, it was going to the hospital to eat something seemed like a really scary thing to do. So a funny thing happened where one of the hospital's a client. And so I was talking to them and they had said, look, we're actually really slow right now. We've got some cases, and in a rural area, we didn't have that many COVID cases at the time. But the problem is people were so afraid they weren't coming in for heart conditions. They weren't coming in for the things they needed to come into. And so she had just said, hey, you can come into the hospital for breakfast. There's no one there. So number one, I'm like, okay, I kind of want to try this out. Well, I went to the hospital and I looked at all the signage, and there was just like all this sort of scary signage that talked about not coming in and whatever. And so I did two things. Number one, I went and got breakfast and experienced for myself. And everybody had a mask on, and they were doing temperature checks. They're still doing all of these things. They had hand sanitizer everywhere. And so despite the fact that I was apprehensive, I sort of wanted to push myself to do it. And then I realized there probably wasn't a more sanitary or safe place in my county than in that room getting breakfast. And so I started doing it again. And I've been doing it for the last several months. The other thing I did was I kind of looked at it from the perspective of local hospitals, my client. And I went back to them and said, guys, you guys are saying that you're slow, but it's the messaging that you're doing. You're scaring people from coming here. We need to change the story that you're telling. And so it gave me an opportunity to talk to my clients as well. And so that is sort of, I'm back into my routine. I ate breakfast at the hospital again this morning. So I love both those questions. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Joel. All right. I've got a couple more from the audience. Okay. So Ellie Sweatbathe or Bath, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. As a new supplier, do you have any advice as to when, quote, too much is too much for a supplier in terms of engagement in some of the promotional distributor Facebook groups? We want to be visible in terms of our product offerings, but not obnoxious and don't want to oversell. This is a fantastic question, Ellie. And so I think that, the term you used in terms of engagement, right? So I think, the example I use a lot of the time is I don't think you can do too much if it's in terms of engagement. I think where you can do too much is in terms of selling. Especially with Facebook groups, but really all social media. I talk a lot about the idea that we should treat it like a cocktail party or a family event or whatever. So at a cocktail party, you wouldn't walk up to, or a networking event, you wouldn't walk up to a new person and just be like, hey, I sell shirts, buy from me, buy from me, buy from me. And if you did, they would avoid you, they would leave, and you'd never get invited again. I think that's where too much is too much. If you were going to these groups and constantly selling all the live long day, then I think it doesn't take very long at all for too much to be too much, right? If someone has asked you a question about a thing that you provide, you replying and serving in that way, I think it's a difference between serving and selling, and saying, hey, no, I think we could actually fill your need. Here's a link to the product. I don't know that you can ever overdo that because they asked you. I think it's just like the idea of engaging and building a relationship. From my perspective, if you are providing value, if you are providing, and value can be answering questions, but it might also be just engaging. When people put content out, I'll just speak for myself. If I put out a blog or something and you like or comment and say, hey, you like the blog, or this is, you put a thoughtful mention in about it, like that never gets sick to me. And it's a way for us to build a relationship personally. And so I think that's a good way for utilize social media. And I don't think too much can be too much. But if you're just posting flyers every day, twice is too much, right? So I hope that answers your question. I think that's a really, really good one. Okay, so next question. Bill Petrie from Brandivate says, what would the 40-ish year, I love 40-ish, that's very kind of you, Bill. What would 40-ish year Kirby tell the 25-year-old Kirby that would make you a better marketer today? Oh, I like that question. You know what? I think it's lean into my instincts. I think so many times, I want to create. I want to put out a video. And I wanted to do this when I was 25. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to do those things. But the voice in my head that said, well, look, man, you don't have an MBA, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do that. That voice in my head was really loud at 25. And I think the thing that 40-ish Kirby has gotten over is I think that we all have that voice. So listen to your, what I like to call my spidey sense. It's right a lot. And I think that the pushback you're going to get when you tell your story, create your content, it's almost never there, right? Like I think the worst case scenario that we always play out in our heads is never there. Occasionally you'll get some negative feedback, but it's honestly way less than the positive you usually get. So I would say my take would be to lean into the urgings that I had back then. The second piece of advice I would give is, I was not a very good college student, and that led to me, not studying as hard as I could have in college, but also even after. I think the thing that I got better at as I got older is I became a better student. I read more. I'm constantly listening to books and podcasts to try and get better. It's fascinating to me now how people don't. One of my favorite quotes was the idea that in 5 years from now, you will be the same person that you are today, except for the people that you meet and the books that you read. Most people are unwilling to put in the work to read. And I would say that would be the other lesson I would say is to do that work when you're 25, not when you're 40. You'll be ahead of the game. Okay, cool. Next question. I've got a few over here, Let's go. David Schultz. David Schultz from Common Skew says, tips or best lesson learned in, quote, remote engagement with your clients when you've been unable to visit them in person. Okay, that's great. So David's talking about how can we better engage with our clients, even though we aren't able to, physically engage with our clients. Man, this is the $1 million question, right, David? I think that in the interest of transparency, when people can still meet with me and we can do it safely, masked up, socially distanced, I still think there's value in face-to-face. I think there's more. I think I understand better how much value there is now, even better than I did before. So when you can and you can do it safely, I think that's still the number one go-to. But how have we been able to do a better job of remote engagement? For me, it's about being intentional about using branded merchandise. And that's, I know that may be a homer answer, but I think when it comes to Common Skew and their events, we did an event and we did a box of goodies and branded merchandise. But then on a sales call, the same concept, right? Is if you want to have an intelligent customer conversation, then you should be giving them the tools in advance so that they can be looking at samples in front of them so that you can engage then on Zoom. That would be one of the things. I think what that takes is us thinking through the sales process more than we have historically had to do, right? Somebody called you and you could run out, grab whatever samples you had, go in and make your presentation and kind of get in front of them and kind of vamp a little bit. That is less on the table now. You just can't do that as much. So I think we have to be more thoughtful and, thinking ahead to do a sales call better. Okay, cool. So David, thank you so much for the questions. We've got some good ones. So Javier, Ellie, Bill, David, Josh, Mark, Jason, and Joel. We've answered all of those questions. I've got a couple more here, and I'm going to dig into it. So this one's kind of a fun one. It's from Josette Bossy from Bay State. So she brought up Cliff Quicksell's name. Cliff is an industry icon and a super smart sales trainer, but she asked if Quicksell was really his last name or part of his sales pitch. I think it really is his last name, by the way. And she said, if you could pick a last name to pair with your business career, what would it be? And I'm not allowed, she says, I'm not allowed to pick Kirby Joy Hossaman or Kirby Kindness. So that was funny. So thanks, Joe. That's a fun question. So I love this question because I think it's, as adults, we look at things differently. And I remember vividly that when I was a kid, I did not like my name Kirby. It was unique. Kids made fun of it because it stood out, right? I remember thinking, gosh, I wish I could change my name to like Mike or Jay or something. And I think that's back when, as a kid, so many times standing out was not what you wanted to do in elementary school, right? But now I love it from a branding perspective. It's great. People remember it. It's unique. And so that's always been good. So I think it helps me stand out in a fairly crowded marketplace. So honestly, the answer is someday I want to be like Cher. I want to be like LeBron. I want to be one of those one name wonders. It's just Kirby. So if I have to give a second one, I guess I'd go with Kirby Hustle, just because I value the idea of hard work. Hustle's probably a little bit of an overused term right now because it felt like everybody was saying it. But the reality of it is it's the one piece that you can control. That there's so much in the world of success, so much in the world of business you can't control, but your effort is one of those things. So whether you call it hustle or hard work or work ethic, that is something that I value a ton. And so if my name could be tied to that, I'd be totally down. Okay, so I think I've only got two more questions. Oh, wait, I got another one that just popped up. Love it. From Walter Kurt. Great question here. What marketing icon do you look up to as setting the bar? Ooh, love this question. So two people pop into my mind, Walter, right now. Yesterday, Seth Godin released a new book. I had actually pre-ordered it. And I'm really excited about it, called The Practice. So if you are a fan of Seth Godin and haven't already read that or haven't already ordered that, that's out there. Seth Godin's probably my number one. He's my Mount Rushmore of marketing icons. I think he does it well in so many ways. And I think he does it in a thoughtful and generous way. He you talk about me being the OG, Javier, he's the OG. This daily blog is still the thing that I read every day. His podcast Akimbo, I think, is one of the more well-produced and thoughtful podcasts in the world, my opinion. And then I guess the other one, when it comes to setting the bar, is still Gary Vaynerchuk. Now, Gary, the funny thing about this is I think Gary's content has skewed a little bit away from me as the audience member. Gary's super smart about who he's making content for, but I think he is still the bar setter when it comes to creating content consistently. Across platforms. He's a practitioner of social media. And so I would say the two that pop into my head, and there's tons of other ones. I'm excited to see Ann Handley speak at the upcoming SKUCon event. There's just so many, but the two that popped into my head originally is Seth Godin and Gary Vaynerchuk. They're still on my Mount Rushmore, if that makes sense. So great question, Walter. I want to skip now down to Jessica. So Jessica Onion from Promo Corner wrote, how do you come up with all of your content ideas? Delivering marketing joy, he said, she said, the Monday Minute, Hossman, you, where do you come up with my ideas? So I think for the most part right now, I'm not thinking specifically of ideas of new content to create. But when I do, I think I try to answer three questions. The first question is, what would the audience or people who follow me be interested in hearing about, seeing, engaging with? So, just kind of think about what that might look like. Number two, what would be fun to do? At this point, when it comes to content, I've created quite a bit of content. And so I only want to do things that, in addition to the things I'm already doing, that I will enjoy doing. So what would the audience want? What would I enjoy doing, which, by the way, will make the audience enjoy it more, I think. And then finally, what will I be able to recreate? I think the question that we make a mistake in asking is, what can I create, right? Because people go out there and they create beautiful video or a beautiful podcast or whatever, and they do it one time. And that's great. But if you want to do content well, I'm a believer in consistency. So the question becomes not only what can I create, but what can I recreate and do it on a consistent basis? And what does that consistency look like? And that's sort of, once I start, putting those parameters around that creativity, I can usually hone in on what kind of content I want to create, if that makes sense. Thanks, Jessica. Great question. All right. At least for now, we're 30 minutes in. I feel like I've covered a lot of ground. And 30 minutes was a sort of where I kind of thought I might be able to talk for this amount of time without getting off track. So I got one more question from Brandon Petrich from Promo Corner, who set up this whole deal today. So Brandon is listening, I hope. He said, your show is called Delivering Marketing Joy, and you have been doing this every week for 312 weeks. Does this show still bring you joy? That's a great question. I love this. I'd say sometimes, right? If I'm just being honest, I think most of the time it still does. I think there are times where if you do anything this long, I don't know, that's got to be over 5 years. Every single Wednesday we've created a show. That's why we decided to do this live version on Wednesdays. Every Wednesday we do a show. So there are times where it becomes a chore. There's no question about it. Where it's mostly a chore is in scheduling and coming up with questions. So every single person gets different questions. I've seen a lot of people who create consistent content, like they do interviews every day. John Lee Dumas is one of these people. Everybody who comes on his show gets the same questions. It's interesting because every person gives different answers to the questions. They all have different stories. But I try, because I'm only asking 3 questions, the person gets to ask me 1 question. With only 3 questions, I try to tailor it very much to the person, their expertise, their background. That takes time, and I really do try to make those different. And then just getting it on the schedule. That's probably the biggest challenge, is just lining up my calendar with somebody else's calendar and doing it in a way that I can make sure I have a show every week. Those are the hard parts. Best part, 2 things. Number 1, doing the actual interview. I still love just engaging and listening and learning. Most of the guests that I have on the show are very dynamic and very interesting. And so I find that I've created a class, a sort of an MBA for myself, if I just take the time to listen. So that part is really fun, and meeting those people and developing a relationship with them. The actual interview piece is my favorite part. That's the most joyful. And then finally, the other piece is probably just the engagement. When you get somebody who really resonates with the audience and they start commenting and liking, that brings me a great deal of joy, because it feels like then I'm actually serving the audience the way that I hope to. It's one of the things I'm most proud of with Delivering Marketing Joy is, if you ever watch it, we're not selling. We don't sell anything on there. It's even very rare for an author to really overhype their own book. I don't talk about branded merchandise on the show unless I'm asked a question about it. The purpose of that was not to be a sales piece. It's a content piece. It's a brand piece. And so I think we've stuck to that. And so I'm pretty proud of that. Okay. So I think I have answered all the questions that have come to me. This has been really fun. I hope that everybody is doing well, kind of surviving the chaos that has been this election cycle and sort of 2020 as it is. One of the things that we're working on is looking at 2021. It brings me hope to be thinking of a new year, and quite frankly, brings me hope to be thinking of thinking of that future. That seems possible. One final question just rolled in. Amy Kleiman Chernow. So again, apologize if I've messed up your name. Amy asked, do you have a mentor in the industry? So that's a great question. I think I would say I have many mentors in the industry, and I think it goes just with different things, right? So I would say that Bill Petrie would be one of the people that I lean on. Mark Graham, who was nice enough to kind of jump in and ask me questions when it comes to entrepreneurship. Actually, Mark and Catherine, I would say those come to mind. My wife is somebody, literally last night we were talking business. She's the person who I probably bounce the most ideas off of. And then when it comes to just running a business that I want to be proud of, I would say Danny Rosen are people that, and again, guys, I'm missing a bunch of people, but those are the people that just popped into my head as the question was asked. And that's what I try to do there. So the answer is, I don't think I have a formal relationship with any of those people where we have a set up call, but they are all, when I ask, they ask questions. And when I have ideas, they're comfortable with me running them by them. And so that sort of relationship is super valuable to me. So great question, Amy. Well, gang, again, I think that I've covered quite a bit. I am always available. So if you are interested, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm on Facebook. If you have questions that you just want to reach out to me privately, please don't hesitate to do that. And we'll be coming back with another episode of Delivering Marketing Joy next week. We'll see you, everybody. Thank you so much.